All right, greetings everybody, and welcome to week number 13. That is right, week number 13. That's 5, that's 10, that's 3, that's 13 of your 9407 class, which is your intellectual freedom class. As always, I'm your professor, Dr. Jace K. Austin, and what we are going to do this week is a state of the course update. After our state of the course update, I'm going to talk about a little bit about a comedian that I think has allowed fear maybe to win and defeat intellectual freedom, at least for him. But there's more nuance to it than that. And then we will end on word about the injunction against Missouri Senate Bill 775, which most of you are Missouri based, and we are a Missouri based program, and this is a bill that had caused librarians quite a bit of stress, and now it is no longer, and that is good news for us. So yes, let's go ahead and get into it. You can speed this up, by the way, but let's go ahead and get into what is coming up. Again, you are here with me doing intellectual freedom. We are recording on November the 18th, so we are going to clip some of these. I just posted that announcement. You have your, let's see what's on the horizon. The main things are these two things. You have the advocacy letter assignment that's going to be due on November the 23rd. That's this coming Sunday. So you need to write a letter this coming Sunday. Hopefully at the graduate school level, writing a letter isn't going to be too much for you. But if you have any questions, of course, contact me. And then also we will have, when we get back from Thanksgiving break, we will have a sync session, our final sync session, which will be our debate. So I'm looking forward to that, and I believe our debaters are as well. Outside of that, you've mainly got discussion board prompts, but there is this final paper that's going to be due on December the 15th. Now, if you are participating in the debate, don't forget you don't have to do the final paper. That is basically your final paper is the debate. So that is written out there. We will go into this just really quickly. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time into it because, again, I think that you all are capable of writing letters based on what I've seen from you otherwise. But if you do want the sample letter, you do have Kawana Bright, Professor Kawana Bright over at East Carolina University wrote a letter here. This is an example. And then you do have the that column about the firing of the librarians over at Washington University St. Louis. That is also, I repeat, that is also something that could count as a letter, even though it was really written as a column. So if you want some ideas on how to write advocacy work in the form of a letter or a column, you can also look to that, and that is in last week's announcement. All right, so having said that, I believe that is everything. I can't believe this was almost 20 years ago now, my goodness. But yeah, I can't dwell on how old I am getting. I am just going to have to come back here. I am getting caught up with your discussion board posts. I've caught up with I'm getting caught up with those. I graded several of those in this class and in one of my other classes over the weekend. That was part of my weekend project when I was not working over the weekend on a part-time job. And outside of that, we do have the banned book reports that also do need to be graded. And again, don't forget about those. I'm hoping that you will look at the work that your classmates did so that you can familiarize yourself with these banned books. I've graded like 2 of them, so I haven't really started on the banned book reports either. Hopefully next week during spring break, I will be catching up in grading in all 3 of my classes. Again, that's my hope. But there's always something coming down the pipeline, so, who knows? I try my best. That's all I can do. All right, but yes, hopefully I will have grades back to you all soon. And with that said, also keep in mind that your rubric, kind of like your rubric for the banned book report, actually, your rubric for the advocacy letter is not a complicated rubric, okay? It's right there. I think I should have everyone getting at least an 11 out of 12, if not a 12 out of 12. Okay, so not a lot to worry about there. All right, and I think that's pretty much it for the state of the course update. If you need me, you can reach out and by Canvas message or by email if needed, and I will assist you. Very happy to do so. And yeah, all right, that is it for the state of the course update. Now, if you want to take a quick break, you can, and then I'm going to get to the second thing that I was going to talk about, which was the comedian that I feel is allowing current events to silence him. Pause. All right, so yeah, let's get into this. I am, as I've spoken about in this class before, I am a moderate, so I am somebody who, I'm a moderate liberal. So actually, whereas a lot of people don't like Bill Maher because I think we are in kind of an extremist climate now, I remember I am going to soapbox a little bit. So I remember, I'm 42 years old. I was in college, in undergrad from 2001 to 2005. And then I was in graduate school, from 2006 to 2008. So I was a young man in the early, in my 20s, in the earlier parts of this century, in the first decade of this century. And what I will say is that I feel in those times we were actually people actually tried to avoid being ideologues. It was actually seen as a bad thing back then to be an ideologue, and I think that Clinton and Bush both kind of, I mean, Bush was conservative, don't get me wrong, George W. Bush was conservative, but he still brought his compassionate conservatism hat and kind of had his conservatism at least framed as if it was like moderate right instead of, right, especially right after 9/11, right after the terrorist attacks. I would say that like right after, from about 2001 to 2003, I would say that Bush was, he dove into some really hardline conservatism there, and that was the mood of the country. He could pretty much get away with anything in 2001 and early 2002, but then things started loosening up. So in late 2002 and 2003, I would say that Bush, came a little bit more to the center, still right wing, but came a little bit more to the center. After we invaded Iraq in 2003, then it became a juggle. He was reelected, and I think that in his second term, Bush did implement quite a few conservative agenda items, but for the most part, he actually didn't take being a right-winger to the extent that I believe being a right-winger is being taken now, okay? And then like Clinton and Obama, they both were center-left. I don't think that there's anyone who is being intellectually honest these days who would tell you that Obama was a leftist. Now, during that time, during the Hope and Change days, yes, he was being seen as a radical leftist and everything like that, but he really was not. Obama was a moderate, Clinton was a moderate. But I say that to say that during those times, yes, we actually frowned upon ideologues, and we actually liked people who could kind of come to the center and kind of negotiate and kind of, compromise and that sort of thing. And as time went on, with the advancement of social media, I think that's when we took this dive into everybody just trying to get attention. So instead of compromise, it became who could be the most right wing and who could be the most left wing and get attention that way, because what social media incentivizes, it does not incentivize compromise. It does not incentivize agreement. It does not incentivize coming up with good ideas and executing them. It incentivizes saying things that get you attention. And moderates really don't say the types of things that get them attention. Now, first, before I even go into anything else, I do want to look at something real quick. So yeah, before I even get any further, what I am also going to say, and I'm a millennial, I'm actually an Xennial, the people who are on the cusp of millennial and Gen X, born in 1983. What I am going to say here, though, is that I want to call this out before I even go any further. So when I talk about being a moderate, a lot of Gen Z and Gen Alpha energy, when you say you're a moderate, they actually kind of look at you like this. And this I have a big problem with, because this isn't moderate, it's just crap. you have this, we want to kill black people, and then you have this, we want civil rights, and then you have this douchebag here holding up a sign that says compromise. Now, when I've called myself a moderate, I've been on social media, in social media forums and things like that. I've had people confront me with this crap picture. This is not moderate because this is not left versus right. This is moderate. We want civil rights is actually moderate. That is the moderate position. And this is, I don't even know. I don't know where on the political spectrum it falls, but this is not conservative. This is beyond conservative, and this is not liberal. This is moderate. So when you have this is to the right. I know it's to the left in this picture, but this is to the right of moderate anyway. So don't tell me this is what moderates sound like. This is not what moderates sound like. A moderate would not, somebody who's truly a moderate would not come into this situation and say compromise. A moderate would align themselves here. And so I do want that to be clear. Now, again, I know a lot of young people just don't buy that. A lot of young people say, oh no, if you call yourself a moderate, you're going to be trying to compromise with everyone, including the Klan and Nazis and all this stuff. And, as long as society is thinking like that, I don't know exactly how we bring society to a place where we can't agree on anything and move forward. I just don't know how we do it. But anyway, I say that to say, yes. So Bill Maher is let me close this. Bill Maher is a moderate liberal comedian. And he gets a lot of flack from both the left and the right. I actually watched the show. A lot of people nowadays are ashamed to say they watch Real Time with Bill Maher because of the social stigma. I don't care. I actually see conversations on his show that I don't see those same types of conversations anywhere else. So I'm proud to watch that show. And what I'm going to say is that, yes, a lot of people, especially a lot of people on the left, I've noticed are saying that Bill Maher has been capitulating to MAGA. He has been doing no such thing. He voted for Kamala Harris. He's been critical of Trump. Even, yes, he did visit Trump. We've also gotten to a point in this country where people act like it's sacrilege to actually meet with and sit down with and break bread with somebody from the opposite side. We cannot continue that either, in my opinion. Okay, so yeah, he met with Trump. That doesn't mean he endorsed Trump. It just means he met with him. But yeah, he met with Trump. He said the experience with Trump wasn't great, wasn't bad. It just was what it was. But, yeah, so Bill Maher is somebody who I would say, again, is moderate and has a history of taking off the left and the right. But what Bill Maher announced this week on a podcast was that he is no longer going to do stand-up comedy. In the wake of what happened to Charlie Kirk, Bill Maher has said he doesn't want to do stand-up comedy because of the dangers, because of the risk of being shot, that sort of thing. And I feel like if he really feels that way, I wish he hadn't said it, because yes, that does mean that the people who tried to intimidate with violence have won in this case. When you come out and you admit, well, yeah, the political climate is this, and a public speaker got shot, and now I don't want to get shot. When you come out and admit this, the people who oppose intellectual freedom violently win. And that, I say, would be the case in this situation. Now, don't get me wrong. There's more to it than that. Yes, he did say that one of the reasons why he is leaving is because he doesn't want to get shot. So that's one of the reasons why he's no longer doing stand-up. But he does mention, for the sake of, full transparency and not being leading on this, he does mention a few other things which make sense, and quite frankly, I wish he would have just stopped at these things and not mentioned the political climate and getting shot and things like that. But another thing that he's mentioned that I think is probably accurate is that he, and I've seen several articles about this. The article that, there it is, because I was about to say the article that I want, I don't know that I'm getting. But yes, this one right here, he added, that's partly because I'm on TV every week, but I didn't sell arenas, and frankly, some who did aren't that great. But when the audience is 35 to 45, they don't want to see somebody who's 70. Bill Maher is 69 years old. I am in that 35 to 45 year old age range that he's talking about. And yes, I can see that. I can I would pay to go see Bill Maher do stand up, but I can see how he's saying, yeah, if you are a young person, you don't want to, if you're under 45, you may not want to go see the 70-year-old perform stand up. And then he also mentions, he's got this show, and his show is bringing him money as well and that sort of thing. So he doesn't really need to do the stand up. And I kind of wish he'd have left it at that. I wish he hadn't introduced the part about the fear of being shot. We just can't do that. It's very unfortunate what happened to Charlie Kirk. But we cannot allow fear to rule the day. Okay, that's just basically where I'm at with it. And I think that what he said pretty much is an acknowledgement that he's allowing fear to rule. So I'm going to leave that there, and then I'm gonna have this particular article in the announcement, as well as some of this other stuff that I'm going to talk about. And you can pause right here, take a little break, and we will come back and finish up with what happened in Missouri. All right, so yeah, let's end this one on some good news. We actually do have some good news that we can report out of Missouri. And by the way, I do want to say this. I do also want to apologize for, quite frankly, I think all of my classes kind of have a negative slant, and maybe that's not great. But I know this class in particular, it's kind of had a negative slant because we are tackling intellectual freedom issues. And I know that can be kind of overwhelming if you keep getting negative on top of negative on top of negative. So some positive that we've got going on here on Monday. So this is from the Missouri Library Association. I'm going to link all these things up. On Monday, November the 17th, which was yesterday, because I'm recording this on the 18th, Jackson County Circuit Judge J. Dale Youngs entered his summary judgment on Senate Bill 775 from 2022. And this is, by the way, a state Senate bill, not federal. As a reminder, the Missouri Library Association and then the Missouri Association of School Librarians jointly filed a petition against the state in February of 2023, in which they argued that the law was unconstitutional. Over 97% of MLA members voted to support MASL as a joint plaintiff in the lawsuit. Yesterday, or on November the 17th, if you're not reading this, or if you're not watching this on the 18th, which probably none of you are since I'm recording late. Yesterday, the judge ruled in favor of MASL and MLA on all three counts, agreeing that Section 573.550 is unconstitutionally vague. Due to the permanent injunction, all books pulled because of Senate Bill 775 should be returned to the library and classroom collections. So, Missouri librarians and library staff applaud the court's decision that Senate Bill 775 was an unconstitutional restriction on the speech and due process rights of library professionals, students, and parents. This ruling removes the fear of prosecution, and this is important. It removes the fear of prosecution and allows library professionals to continue doing what they do best, partnering with families to foster a love of literacy and learning. So we are going to go into the Missouri Independent article here, but yes, basically, this was some scary stuff. And I was teaching at the time, teaching here in Missouri, teaching intellectual freedom here in Missouri at the time that this passed. And my students were at the time very, very nervous because this is what the law, Senate Bill 775, it was a law that made it a misdemeanor offense for school employees that supplies quote unquote sexually explicit material to students. But this has now been made vague. Now been made void because it was vague. It was voided because it's vague. There we go. I actually am going to go kind of down here and just kind of read. This isn't too long of an article, and I'll also just kind of link it up, and I'll be soapboxing a little bit as I read. So, and for those of you who don't know, Jackson County, because not everybody here does live in Missouri, Jackson County is in the western part of the state. It borders Kansas, and that is where Kansas City is. Kansas City is in Jackson County. I believe the county seat would be Independence. Actually, yes, the county seat is Independence. So a Jackson County Circuit Court judge struck down a state law criminalizing school employees for supplying sexually explicit material to students, ruling it unconstitutionally vague and overbroad in a 5-page decision on Monday. And I do love this quote from the ACLU. This is a real victory for all library professionals who are trained to select age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate material for students in both public and private schools. And that would be you. You getting this degree is you being trained to select age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate material. It is a real insult to their training and professionalism for the government to think that it knows better what books belong in those schools, and it's an insult to the parents as well. So, scrolling down, the now void law passed by Missouri lawmakers in 2022 expanded the state's regulations on pornography to create the offense of providing explicit material to a student. It applied only to those affiliated with a public or private elementary or secondary school in an official capacity. Scrolling further, the law is part of a larger trend placing higher scrutiny on what books are offered by libraries and schools. In Missouri, efforts earlier this year to place new restrictions on digital libraries and expand the officials who could face prosecution were debated, but ultimately did not pass. So yes, this was something that could have happened and thankfully didn't earlier this year. I would have had to have put some stuff in the course had this happened, but thankfully it did not. Thankfully it did not. So yeah, so there you go. And then this is a quote from the ACLU here. The ACLU has been seeing an increase in the last at least 5 years in book removal from school libraries and public libraries for a variety of reasons that all culminated in this law being passed. And that is pretty accurate. And yes, so the Missouri Library Association and the Missouri Association of School Librarians, as we saw earlier, they teamed up with the ACLU and Stenton LLP to challenge this law after they say hundreds, I don't know exactly how much, but hundreds of titles were removed from shelves throughout the states. And I like this as well. This quote is good as well. Librarians and school professionals statewide now assess prospective and existing titles in their collection based on fear rather than expertise, the attorneys wrote in July. And that is a big deal. We want to shape our collections based on expertise. We do have that module, as you all remember, on librarians and self-censorship. And so, yes, this is what we're getting at right there. If you are building your collection based on fear rather than your expertise, you are self-censoring. They have been reluctant or have refused to add new art, books, or even digital access to such materials that contain diverse or marginalized content or viewpoints, lest some unknown government official determine the work contains prohibited explicit sexual material. The state has long prohibited people from giving pornographic material to minors. This decades-old law uses a different definition of pornography, one that has been upheld in courts only as prohibiting speech unprotected by the First Amendment. So before that Senate bill, and this is why we have our First Amendment stuff as well, before that Senate Bill 775 back in 2022, the law that we had on the books here in Missouri, it was only prohibiting speech that was unprotected by the First Amendment, and you all should know what speeches those are now that you've taken this class. Things like fighting words and things like obscenity and things like true threats, but not hate speech. Okay, but the 2022 law extends beyond that precedent, and plaintiffs argue impinging on free speech rights. So yes, you have those free speech rights. If it is not unprotected by the First Amendment, then that is your right. That is your free speech. All right, the case was filed by blah, blah, blah. Now, this is interesting too. I want this to be clear. So Deputy Solicitor General Samuel Freeland labeled librarians' arguments as insufficient. So the arguments that librarians had brought against this law, he labeled them as insufficient since they hadn't presented evidence of the law being enforced. So basically what was going on here was that we really didn't have any examples of this law being enforced. We didn't have any examples of librarians or other people in the state being subject to criminal charges because of what was going on here. And so absent evidence of any instance of any defendant actually enforcing the law against the plaintiff's members, plaintiffs can only raise hypothetical enforcement examples. And that approach has been rejected in Missouri courts. So basically, if you've only got hypothetical examples, the Missouri courts traditionally have not done much with that. But in this case, thankfully, they have made a move, and I feel they have made a correct move. And then I do want to, I'll close by saying, because this was pretty funny. So, the judge may have even rushed his decision, but he's retiring at the end of November. So he had to get that out quick so that he can retire. And quite frankly, Judge Youngs, thank you for doing that. All right. So you retired and you took care. You looked out for the librarians before you retired. We appreciate that. So yes, let's leave it right there, especially since you did have a long check-in video last week. I am Dr. Jace, and Senate Bill 775 is something that I am happy to see get erased. Jace erased. I can go to sleep because I got my rhyme. I will see you in the discussion boards. Ta-ta for now.